hear you, but not so close that you're breathing into it.
Okay.
But
is that okay?
Yeah, you're doing great. We'll work our way through it. So.
I worked in a school. I'm loud. I know.
So is Board Member Burns. Will you go ahead and raise your hand? Right hand.
Yes,
do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Jorde.
Thank you. Please state your name.
It's Elizabeth Ellen Tribble.
And you go by Beth sometimes?
I go by Beth all the time.
And just help me out, what's your relationship with Dr. Gunyon, who we just talked with?
I'm the little sister.
Okay, so when he said little sister, he was referencing you as someone who would stay at the family home.
No, he was referencing Lisa, who is younger than I am.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're Dr. Mark's little sister, but then each of you have a younger sister.
Correct.
Lisa. Okay, thank you for that. Your exhibits are already in evidence, but I should just ask you if I went through those questions and posed them all to you, would your answers, your personal answers, be substantially similar to the ones in the pre-file testimony?
Yes.
And do you, from your perspective, have any updates or corrections different than what your brother Mark discussed with us?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Updates are correct. Not
to your testimony.
Not to our testimony. No.
Okay, so let me re-ask that, so we're clear.
Okay.
So the written testimony was intended to be kind of everything, essentially, that you wanted to say as of July. And my question to you now is, since that time, have you come to realize there's any corrections or updates that need to be made to the prior testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Few things. I listened to the testimony in the hearings, and I listened to Mr. Powell speak about sheltering in place. And I also attended a PHMSA conference the first day of it, and I listened to Mr. Briggs speak. He is one of the emergency responders from Satasha. And Mr. Powell was speaking about sheltering in place being a safe thing we can do. Mr. Briggs said, when he spoke about this sheltering in place, that he pulled people that were sheltering in place out of their homes that were unconscious. And he didn't see that as a wise thing to do. I also asked Mr. Briggs about, at that time, if a CO2 pipeline rupture was like a natural gas pipeline rupture, because we'd heard that many times from Summit. And he said, no, not at all. One is really kind of fun to watch with the natural gas pipeline. He said you just kind of stand there and watch it burn down until it's safe, as a responder. But he went on to say the CO2 was more like a zombie apocalypse. And he said there were people seizing and there were people foaming at the mouth. And he painted a picture that was just very scary. And I asked him, if you had to buy a home, would you do it near a CO2 pipeline? And he said, my son was thinking about buying a home. I would tell him to be at least 5 miles away from the CO2 pipeline to be safe. So that was one update. The next update was from the water permits that have been filed for by Summit. I'm from Grand Junction. Grand Junction had issues before with water when they put in the Louis Dreyfus plant. So I'm very concerned about the amount of water that will be left for the town, or for, like our neighbor, Brian Sandage. He has 36 head of hogs. People have to be able to feed the livestock and water the livestock. I'm very concerned about our neighbors. So they're just really good people. And then I've written the DNR on my thoughts on that and let them know that please, turn down this permit. Also, Mark talked about Mr. Skovanec. I spoke with Frank McDonald about moving his, the pipeline to the other side, and asked him, I told him what Mr. Sylvanek said during testimony, and to quote him, he said, "The landowner to the south specifically requested the alignment we have now." And Frank said he was very clear that he did not want the pipeline placement that Mr. Sylvanek stated Mr. McDowell supported.
Objection, Your Honor.
State your objection.
Well, at least a couple things. One, the gentleman who testified before this told this exact same story, so asked and answered. Two, this testimony is supposed to be split between the previous witness and this witness. My understanding of Mr. Jorde's explanation of that was that the doctor would handle everything else, and this witness would handle contacts with Summit representatives.
I'm getting there.
He's asked an open-ended question for updates or corrections to her written testimony. Those are for discrete issues, not for a several-minute-long dissertation on what the witness would like to say. I think that's all my objections for now.
Okay.
Mr. Jorde.
Well, I think she got that answer in on Mr. McDonald, so I guess I would just, is there anything else that you think's material?
I don't know if it's material. I just know that Mr. McDonald felt that this had been told to him that this was not movable, and that he realized later that he had been lied to because he watched other people get their pipeline moved on their parcels. So he felt very upset about what had transpired. I just wanted to get that piece in. And then the last thing I wanted to add to my testimony was I wanted to dispute the number of times that Summit had spoken, the land agent had spoken with my family. And basically my aunt had spoken, Summit had written, the land agents had written that they had spoke to my aunt 25 to 30 times. She had 4 to 5 conversations with him, okay, on the phone. And the next thing was that it stated she had an in-person meeting with Summit, with Jack Scanlon. She did not. She would have had to buzz him in. She lives in an independent living cooperative. So that did not occur. I had 2 meetings with Jack Scanlon, and that were on the phone, 2 talks with him on the phone. The first one I called him, and I asked him where my trust easement offer was in 2022. I received one for myself in 2021 and one for the trust, and I'm the trustee. And those came to my house in 2022 when I received a new easement offer. I got one for my portion, but not one for the trust. I was trying to figure out where it went. So I got the number from my aunt, and I called Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Scanlon had no idea where it went. I told him at that time I didn't really want the pipeline on my property. He said, this is a done deal. You have no say. And that was how we started what Mr. Burns would call negotiations. There were none. I didn't get any negotiations with Summit. If I said something, I was shut down in a bullying way. I thought, that's it. I hung up the phone and I was crying. The next time I spoke with Mr. Scanlon was in January on the 5th. He had called me, and I asked him at that time if it was even possible to move the pipeline back to the western border of our parcel. And he said, it's too late for that. They're going to do it as cheap as possible. And he asked me about an amount, and I kind of told him I'd need $1 million because this is all the liability you're putting on me. If something happened to those kids next door or the hogs down the road, I'm liable if that ruptures. And I don't want I would feel horrible if something happened to my brother. He comes like from May through, I don't know, in the fall when you stop mowing. He mows every week. He's there. My renter I went to kindergarten with. Okay, we graduated high school together. These are not people I want any harm coming to. And I think that, I don't even know if my sister had a plan to move home after her husband retired. And I don't even know if that'll happen now, because if a pipeline's there, she may not feel safe enough to move home. So there's a lot of things that this is affecting in our lives that, this has been pretty emotional for me. I mean, my dad had cancer. I went to the farm and stayed with him. When he passed away, I took care of my mom for the next 2 years, and she had Alzheimer's. And then I put her in a nursing home, and then I had to sell a 100-year-old farm for my aunt. And when I finally closed the estate, the next day, I received the thing from Summit. I was finally able to take a breath, and the next day I got that postcard in the mail that says, "We're going to put a pipeline on your property. Come to this meeting."
So let me just jump in there. You mentioned your aunt. Just for the record, what is your aunt's name?
Mavis Bush.
Okay, and she has either a direct or indirect ownership through a trust in the property?
My Aunt Mavis owns 50% of the property. Yes. She inherited it from my Uncle Bob.
Okay.
And my mom was brother, sister,
Yep. Oh, that's very good. And so what I'm going to do now, ma'am, is I'm going to actually see if any other folks have questions for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Before we get started, I never did get a chance to rule on Summit's previous objection, which would have been a sustain, because under Chapter 199 AAC 7.10 sub 2, if there's more than 3 updates, they need to be done at least 3 days prior to the hearing. So we've covered a lot of updates. So Mr. Taylor, we can go to you, but just a quick reminder, we are doing redirect only over the pre-filed testimony as it relates to the interactions with Summit. All right. Thank you, sir.
And, man, I think you answered most of my questions already. The main thing I wanted to ask, I guess, at this point is, did you discuss with any Summit representatives alternative routes?
And yes, I asked if we could possibly move the pipeline over to the west side of the parcel. And he said it's too late for that. They're going to do it as cheap as possible.
Did you talk with some representatives about the terms of the easement?
No, there was no. It felt like there was no discussing the easement. It didn't feel like anything was like I had any say in this. I felt like my voice was kind of taken away.
Explain that to me.
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
I don't understand how that could possibly be a cross-examination question.
Mr. Taylor?
I don't know why it isn't. I'm asking her to explain what she was describing there. I'm just asking for details. That's proper cross-examination.
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, if I may respond. I don't know how that question in any way challenges this witness's testimony, the veracity of it, her motive. At this point, we've spent hours, in fact, days, perhaps weeks, of Sierra Club conducting so-called cross-examination on Jorde landowner witnesses, some of whom most likely got to Mr. Jorde because Sierra Club refers people to Mr. Jorde. It's simply not cross-examination. It's further direct examination. It's not intended to impeach the witness. It's not intended to demonstrate their bias or challenge the veracity of their testimony. It's just asking for more information, which then Mr. Jorde gets to redirect them on.
Okay, we'll sustain the objection. Proceed, Mr. Taylor.
No more questions.
Thank you. Ms. Greenhagen.
Hi.
I have a really easy question. So
Thank you.
just for making sure the record is accurate. You said you were from Grand Junction, but do you live there now?
No, I don't.
Do you actually live in Lynn County?
I live in Lynn County. I live in Marion.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
No further questions.
Okay. Want some more questions, Mr. Jordan?
I think we covered it in terms of the interactions with Summit and you feeling bullied by them, so I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
I just,
Thank you, Ms. Trimble.
I know I have to
Appreciate
say
your
one more
testimony.
thing I didn't get to, which is they put in their exhibit that my mom, they had a conversation with my dead mother. I think you should know that. That's important to me. Thank you.
Appreciate